Today we're going to walk through Vodafone's approach and progress with our partners VOIS and Accenture to globally reinventing our customer experience across all digital channels. My name's Glenn. I'm the head of digital engineering in the UK and group head of cloud engineering. With me, my colleagues, my friends, Chris, Chief Commercial Officer for VOIS, and Charlie, lead delivery manager for Accenture in Ireland. I just want to take a second or so to sort of give the context of the telco industry in general. It's going through a pretty transformative phase, and it's probably not necessarily different from a lot of other sort of telcos or markets or sort of other industries today. The reality is when you look at kind of the amount of expansion in digital use, rapidly evolving technology, including obviously the integration of Gen AI, IoT, massive sort of exponential growth, if you like, in terms of digital services or IoT services and devices, all underpinned with 5G technologies and capabilities. It's an incredibly competitive landscape. And so the question for us, the question for Vodafone has been, how can we stay competitive in such a competitive market? How can we keep the edge? How can we make sure that we're really continue to try to lead and really kind of create the best experience for our customers whilst maintaining and/or ideally reducing and keeping our costs low? On the plus side, we've already been on this change curve. We've been on this change curve for quite a while. If you take ourselves back to about 5-6 years ago, when the term social distancing, most of us thought it meant something that an introverted developer like myself would describe our weekends. In fact, at that time, ourselves, Vodafone, VOIS, and Accenture, we're already thinking about how can we radically and differently approach our technology when it comes to delivering amazing customer experiences. In fact, our CEO, since she's been appointed, has been super clear. We, Vodafone, need to change. We need to take a radically different approach to simplifying our ability to both innovate and deliver amazing customer-centric experiences. Ultimately, we're trying to get to a state of growth. The goal is clear, as is the technology challenges that face us. Again, some context of Vodafone. With 20+ operating countries around the world, very distributed, all operating in semi-technology silos, we have 20 different ways of delivering an application, 20 different ways of delivering a chatbot, a website, an IVR experience, and 20 different ways of helping our contact center agents connect with our customers. And then we have 20+ different ways of bringing all of that software to life into production. If we're going to change, this is the first place that we need to start. Ideally shift from this very locally focused, quite traditional telco IT stack where we have commercial off-the-shelf products. We effectively bolt them together, we configure them, and that setup or that stack creates the bulk of our technology approach for our customers. We wanted to change that and move towards reuse and global platforms as the vehicle for our ability to both increase speed and efficiency across digitally native, cloud-native services that we've developed. And this starts with CX. We have to have a relentless obsession about amazing CX as our key differentiator for all of our customers. We need simpler, slicker, and more performant, capable, and complete digital journeys. Ultimately, quite a proven fact, this improves retention, improves sales, reduces the burden on our contact center agents, and importantly, reduces costs. And we apply the same energy to delivering amazing experiences and iteratively finding and honing those experiences as we do when we try to create the very first MVP of that product. To achieve this change, we need to focus on two things. First of them is reuse. And the way we've approached reuse from an engineering and a developer perspective is starting with things like self-service. This is at the heart of our engineering strategy. Ultimately, our goal here is how can we dramatically enhance engineering productivity. Example, if something exists across the 20 markets, don't remake it. Don't build another version of it. Let's use it. If you need to improve it, that's okay. Don't rebuild the same wheel or reinvent the same wheel again and again and again. If it doesn't exist, build it. Build it in a way that any of the other markets can also take that technology and reuse it themselves. Inner source is another foundational element to all of that. If I want any one of the digital engineering teams across the 20 markets to be able to take and or propose changes to any of that software, they need to be able to have access to the code, understand what the right frameworks are, understand what the right qualitative gates are that need to be in place, understand who the owners of that code are, how to submit a PR, and bring that to life. We need to take an automation-first approach to be able to bring that to life in a way that is sustainable for speed across that many markets. Everything for us, as far as pipelines, quality gates, infrastructure scaling, observability, through to FinOps, is written as code. So we can have nice, repeatable, simple steps for people to be able to develop their software and deliver that into production. And all of this contributes to our ability to have sustainable speed. It isn't just about speed, it's about how can we have sustainable speed for ongoing delivery. The second element, if we're going to maximize that reuse pillar, how do we abstract the services that we can, or that can be made common across all of these markets, and create global platforms at scale? Whether that's a mono repo, where we have a multi-market app, so instead of having 20 different mobile applications, we have a single mobile app where the mono repo has a pipeline that creates multiple applications depending on the configuration that each market requires. Again, the context from a Vodafone perspective is every single one of these markets will have subtly different journeys that are relevant for their market. How can we have a repo or a code base that is able to cope with that and deliver a different experience? We have a locally relevant global reward system. How can we roll out more platforms like this where we have the code base in a single repository, but the experience highly relevant to our local markets? Again, when we talked earlier about the 20+ ways of being able to deliver that software into production, how can we harmonize and mature our DevOps tooling across our developer experience? With Telco as a Service, or TaaS, this platform improves our time to market, improves quality, improves uptime, ultimately saving costs and lost revenue. This strategy at scale requires partners and collaboration with partners that have experience, that understand how to deliver technology at scale across multiple markets. And this is where our tight ties with VOIS and Accenture have really come to bear over the last 5 years. It's been absolutely essential to leverage their delivery skills and capabilities to be able to achieve the results that we're going to hear shortly from Charlie. And now I'm going to hand over to Chris to talk a little bit more about VOIS.
Thanks, Glenn. So I'm sure everyone's heard about Vodafone and Accenture before, heard of them. How many people in the room have heard of VOIS before? Maybe one or two that were strategically planted. So I just wanted to spend 2 minutes just introducing VOIS. 14 years ago, we were established as Vodafone's internal shared services organization. Since then, we've grown to around 30,000 people across the world and saved billions of pounds for Vodafone through our insourcing strategy in services like customer operations, IT and digital, corporate functions, those kinds of areas. But during that time, we've built quite the set of capabilities, of products, of offerings, and reused those globally across all of the different Vodafone markets. But last year, we realized we needed to change because, as Glenn said, Vodafone's changing. With the mergers and the divestiture happening in UK, Spain, Italy, it's clear that VOIS needed to adapt as well. And as we started to work this through, we think we spotted a gap in the market and an opportunity really to leverage that global capability that we've built and actually offer it to the wider market. But to do that, we knew that we needed to have a partner. So as of October, we created a new joint venture with Accenture. And Accenture invested 150 million into that new joint venture for a minority stake. And we've got pretty big ambitions. And VOIS Digital, which you'll hear a bit more about today, is definitely one of those. And there's no better example than what we've done together in Vodafone Ireland and the capability we've created in partnership with AWS and Accenture. So Charlie, do you want to take us through Vodafone Ireland?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Cheers. So far we've heard about the strategy, what we're trying to build, and obviously the delivery team that are going with it. And we're now going to go through some of the Ireland work that we've been doing, which is nothing short of absolutely phenomenal. But before we go into what they're doing in the future, we need to understand a bit about where they were before. Now, to start with, the Irish market are incredibly customer obsessed. Their customers are demanding more and more, and they are going into the markets. New providers are coming into the space, so they have to be at the cutting edge of technology. But with the Vodafone Ireland space as a legacy tech, what they found was their legacy environment was very high cost to look after, needing higher investment, which actually was returning less and less as they were going the year on year. And with that, on top of it, changes were becoming slower and slower. With a monolithic type environment and there is their release strategy, you could have months worth of work being blocked by the smallest of changes. So their agility was very low. But on top of that, their poor performance and their inability to change and react to the customer markets were really hindering their ability to be at the front of what is a digital revolution. On top of that, and this goes back to the way that the Irish market are set up, they're incredibly ambitious. And with that, they are a very small Vodafone market. So coming with that is the idea of having a much smaller capex. So they have to scrutinize every decision that is made about the way that they are spending their money. So there isn't that free money to try and build brand spanking new, cutting edge technology, delivering the best and greatest tech that is out there. And lastly, and I think this is kind of the biggest part they had, this wasn't just a technology change. This was something that needed to be done across the business and technology teams in harmony. Within that, and inevitably, with the technology problems that they had, what you were finding was blame game between different people and fractious environments and relationships. So we had to really change quite a lot of the world together. Now, what did that mean? Well, in reality, what it meant was staying still was no longer an option, and they all knew this. There was a recent Accenture and Droga analysis that said that 88% of customers, of businesses are saying that customers are changing faster than they're able to change their tech, which is a huge amount of change that is coming through for the market, that they are demanding that change. In that same study, they looked at 40% of global CEOs were also saying in the next 10 years, they don't think they're going to be economically viable. Now, that's a huge statement to make, to think that 4 out of every 10 companies are managing themselves towards extinction. They're not set up to grow. The second part of it was they needed to leverage their ecosystem. And within their ecosystem, being a smaller market, they needed to really, really lean on that full spectrum of help that was around. So from a Vodafone UK perspective and the capabilities that they've set up with all the amount of training, the amount of investment that they've done in their platforms, they needed to lean on their own teams in different markets. They obviously needed the likes of VOIS and Accenture, which we've already discussed, but they equally needed AWS, and that's why we're here as well. The AWS partnership in this was not just the cloud technology team. They provided training, SME support, qualifications, and SME guidance in some of the technology solutions that we created. But lastly, and most importantly, was the Accenture and AWS MAP funding, which is something that we were able to tap into to help navigate some of those financial constraints that big projects start, and often start the kind of first problem of getting mobilized. So within this project here, we were able to secure nearly $500,000 to set up this project to start the migration across. And that, again, was just another huge relationship booster that AWS were able to provide through the Accenture MAP funding. Thirdly, well, they knew that they needed to scale a robust foundation. And within that, all the work that Glenn has talked about so far, combining with the fact that Ireland didn't want to just take and consume another local product, they were setting themselves and their ambitions incredibly high. They wanted to create the next platform that was going to scale into Europe, into the other markets, and if possible, beyond that. They wanted to be the benchmark to drive real change. And lastly, they knew they needed to harmonize the business. And this was a really key part that they wanted to internally restructure themselves, reorganize themselves in a more value stream orientated way. So they knew within this, as you can kind of see, this is not just a single technology platform change. This is a complete technology revolution, including the business change, operational change, and ultimately what we created was a brand new global platform that is able to be locally tailored. And that is what Project WEF, or the Website Experience Factory, is all about. So, looking at it a little bit closer, what is it? Well, the website on its own, from a technical perspective, is an AWS-based digital platform. It leverages microsite architecture. As Glenn said before, it is leveraging the best-in-class DevOps. We're using TMF-compliant APIs, which means not only are we able to scale this internally within the Irish market, leveraging some of the already existing work, but we were able to scale this and create a product that is able to go into different markets. Conforming to that standard is a huge part of the world, of the reuse strategy that we are building within the Vodafone global platforms. We extended the reuse, and that was a real mantra of the project that we started on. Within the reuse concept, we extended, we enhanced, we built, and we refreshed some of the work that was already done in the UK to make it even more reusable in other markets. But from a business side as well, WEF represented so much more than just the technology. This was showing that the business trusted the technology team to invest the money in something that would grow their future and hit the strategy that Margarita set out at the start. And that was a really big piece of the work, because the business case that we all collectively put together, and that wasn't just a single part, it was a full ecosystem piece of work, had to be absolutely spot on to make sure that that return on investment was going to double and triple what they were expecting. So the challenge was set. We needed to deliver a market-leading, best-in-class technology solution for 20% of the cost that it would take to do this starting from scratch. It was a bit of a challenge, but we rose to it. Now, within this, what we had to do as a really huge, ambitious task, but something that we knew full well we could do, was leverage a lot of those reuse points. So we took 80% of the UK code from the web and all the components that go with it. We took 100% of the One App program, which we'll talk about very shortly. We took 100% of the source web components, and equally we had to take it, but also give back to that component library to make sure that we were continuing the reuse mantra. We took 100% of the UK CMS solution, which was a headless CMS based using Contentful, and all the ecosystem around it. And ultimately, within the financial model, we needed to make sure that we dropped their license cost by 60%. So it was a huge amount of work we needed to go in. But ultimately, that was the level of trust that we needed to get to in order to deliver the results. So that's a little bit about the logical side of it. If we dive a little bit further into what this actually looks like from a technical perspective, this is, again, a huge amount of transformation within such a small amount of time. The AWS components we've got in here, as expected, we've used Lambdas, API gateways, SQS, SNS, S3, WAF, API gateways. All of these combining to making this ecosystem of products this ecosystem of global platforms that are scaling across to deliver the customer experience to Ireland. Now, within that, this is a multi-channel scalable solution. So right now, we started by saying this was the website experience factory. But what we are trying to build here is something so much bigger. We'll talk about how this happens in a short while. But ultimately, what I want you to get in your minds is the fact that this is not just the website. Vodafone sell their products in call centers, in retail stores, and for feet on the street. So we needed to create a single platform that encapsulated all of the use cases, not only for a single channel, but across everything, and then go global as well. On top of that, it was fully modular. So as you can see in there, some of the components that we have set up are set up and architected in a way that we're able to scale this into a value stream model. And that was the business change that was enabling and joining this together. The product itself is micro DDS enabled, which was a concept that Booking.com used to enable their front and back end systems to decouple themselves. So some of the examples of the architecture we've done is being able to be continuously on to the customer, even though some of the back end systems may be down. And that experience and customer obsession is something that is driving through every single decision that we've made. Now, on top of that, one of the key things we have is, as Glenn said, is take the components of other global platforms that are benefiting your solution and where they're at. So what Glenn's going to do is talk us through some of those other components that we've used to build this ecosystem up.
Thank you, Charlie. Yeah, and it's, again, before I kind of dive into that, I just want to reiterate, like, this is not just sort of transformational and groundbreaking from a Vodafone perspective, but from a general telco perspective, this is radical. I know from a software engineering perspective, this is probably pretty normal, but actually this approach, extremely radical from a general telco perspective, which is brilliant. It's exactly what you would want to do from a technologist perspective, and definitely what the intention was from the start. Ultimately, as Charlie said, this is a modular approach. I think I mentioned at the very outset, we don't know what new technologies, more next generation of Gen AI is going to be tomorrow. So taking a modular approach to our architecture is absolutely pivotal and fundamental to make sure that we're kind of future-proofing this strategy. Ultimately, we're looking for rapid deployment and delivery of changes across all markets. This isn't about just Ireland or just the UK or just Portugal or just Greece. This is about how can we make sure that whenever and if ever a platform becomes applicable for a market, they're able to take that and roll it out as quickly as possible. And ultimately, there are three platforms and concepts that sort of underpin our current architecture and approach. The first is a common approach to DevSecOps tooling. I think I mentioned this a few times now, but it is absolutely fundamental to make sure that we're getting the software, the good software engineering best practices and principles in the hands of all of our engineering teams. TAS is about bringing those best practices to a single platform and framework in terms of building, testing, securing, delivering, observing, and ultimately scaling software services. Everything we do is written as code. Ultimately, so that the devs can self-serve and own the life cycle of the very applications that they're developing and delivering into production. No longer are they handing off to an operations team. This is all within the gift and all within the hands of our development teams. Everything written as code and the devs owning the life cycle means we also need to have a single path to production. We can't have it worked fine in pre-prod, but somehow production is different. Not possible. We now have a single path to production, and given that everything is written as code, it means that every single change to every environment is propagated through that pipeline, meaning we have complete consistency. Whatever we test in pre-production is exactly how it's going to react in production. Globally secured by design templates reduces that time. So rather than having 20 times review the app for security setup and whatever else we were doing in our previous approach, we now review the single approach for these platforms, and that is then common and standard across all markets. Importantly, it's also a really key opportunity for our cyber teams to enforce security uniformly without having to literally go to every single market and deploy exactly the same thing. Quality gates inside every single one of the pipelines also means we can have literally any NFR along the path to make sure that our CX promise for the journey that the development teams are taking is met at every single release that we're deploying. The second one, I think as Charlie mentioned, is around having a consistently rich application experience. With One App, it's a new mobile experience that we are rolling out across markets where we have management and capabilities of our in-life experience for our customers. It's basically a mono repo. It's a React native app, so instead of having a specific iOS and a specific Android app, we have a React native app that is fully modular. So if you are Italy and you have a certain set of features, you can basically configure your deployment pipeline and your build from the same mono repo pops up and creates your experience, fully localized to your market. The important value of this is that we still have the number of developers we need for applications around the globe, and they can all, back to my inner source point, contribute to this same global platform, making sure that it stays rich, it stays relevant, and all the features can be unlocked without having to wait for some central ivory tower or team to be able to deliver that for them. Incredibly important and incredibly valuable. And the third one is around fully responsive, micro front-end based web experiences combined with CMS. And this is something that Charlie is going to take us through a little bit more.
Thanks, Glenn. So as Glenn said, the CMS platform that we've got, which is kind of one of the last key areas, that was a huge changing point for Vodafone. Moving towards a headless architecture, again, as I said, powered by Contentful, with a full ecosystem around it of page rendering, security, performance, and just fundamentally making sure that the developers had the business teams had the right access, controls, and authority and autonomy to make the changes they needed at the right time. So as you can kind of see, hopefully, this project and this platform that we're building is actually a full ecosystem of technology changes. But the last two bits around, just before we move on, of how we pulled this all together is actually the difference that we did between our front-end part of the app and the back-end. Our front-end, based on Next.js, is incredibly lightweight. And that was done on purpose, because what we've done is create a completely stateless, highly performant system that is rendering the pages for the customer in sub-seconds. So from a customer experience perspective, they are able to see and interface with our pages instantly, which is massive. On top of that, and where we start building this multi-channel capability, is our back-end journey composition services. This idea and notion that we are building a Quarkus Java-based technology stack that is using all of the orchestration, it's performing all of the state management, and all of the business logic, so that in theory, a customer can go into a store, can start a journey, can call up, and then finish that exact same journey on their website. Building the idea of a single channel for every single customer interaction that Vodafone has globally. So that's the technology. But one thing that is really important here, and this is part of that full transformation, is what was the impact? And when I say what was the impact, what is the impact going to be in the future as well? And how are we setting ourselves up to scale? So to bring this to life a little bit, we're going to take one of our customer journeys, which is the fixed journey. And for those that don't know fixed, it's broadband, selling internet. And it's one of Vodafone's big ambitions to grow and to scale this product out and to become the market leader in selling this. So what we did within the island journey is take what was a 12-step, highly complicated process and reduce it down to 4. We did this not just using the technology. Whilst the technology empowered the change, the driver behind this was absolutely driven by the business. They wanted to make the legal wording less onerous on the customer. They wanted to make the experience better. Even basic things, like previously when you would show an image, you would have routers, network, computers. That's not relevant. What they actually now have is on the 3 different products they've got, very relevant imagery to say at the very start for their basic package. It might just be one person on a computer, right up to their top-end package, where there is a family with games consoles, streaming, and multiple laptops all using the system. So without even looking at the data or any of the text underneath it, you've got the imagery in your head of what you're buying. And it was that type of change, powered by the technology, that is the real driving force behind this project. The design team in Ireland, the Vodafone team, have just recently, 3 weeks ago, won the Irish Digital IDI Award for the best design team in Ireland. So their ambition and their driving point is entirely powered by what we've built here. So that is part of the design. But what was the actual impact from an overall business perspective? Organic growth and organic demand has increased by 15.2%, the highest Vodafone have had globally, in the market. Their sales conversion has increased from 4.3% to 6.3%, again, the highest Vodafone have had in Ireland in the market. They've got 100% control of the business SEO. So what that is enabling is them to have the autonomy and the ability to own their own future, to deploy changes at their own time. We have now developed and got, as Glenn said, part of the DevSecOps. It takes 9 minutes to deploy a full production change, including testing, security, code piling, and retesting afterwards at the end. Fully online, fully during the day, no impact to the customers at all. We've accelerated A/B testing and experimentation, which is allowing us to now give the challenge to Vodafone to be ahead of the customer. So no longer, as I started the conversation, with stats that were around companies being behind customers, now they have the ability to be ahead, and they can make and dictate where things are moving. Our page speed, as we've referenced through both the CMS and the way our front end is working, has improved the loading time by 129%. That is now sub-second loading speeds for what the Irish customers and the Irish market are seeing. And that type of stat is going to get bigger as we scale out. But most importantly, and I think this is where the operational changes come in, that is not only securing this as a global platform, but also securing the digital reinvention for Ireland. This is a full value stream transformation. So as we deploy new changes, we are fundamentally changing the way that they are set up. And we're able to bring the developers closer to the closer to the customers, so that they're able to see and feel accountable and responsible for making those changes and making them right. So that's the Ireland story. Now, what next? I think fundamentally, the first thing we've got to do is we need to continue delivering this journey. And within that, what it means is we are delivering the next journeys that are going live. There's one coming out in the next couple of weeks. And then iteratively, we will simply migrate across from the old to the new. There is no impact to the customer in terms of what they see and how they manage this. On top of that, we're going to scale into Europe. So Portugal, as Glenn referenced earlier, is the next market to go live. And when we started speaking to them about the problems that Ireland have, as Glenn said, 21 times doing things in different ways, all of a sudden the Portuguese market said, that is exactly the problem we're having. So we are being very relevant to the other markets as well. One of the other things that came out of this is we're actually giving back to the UK. And it's this cyclical nature of the reuse, which is something that we didn't expect to be as big of an impact as it has. So the fixed journey that we've just gone through is actually getting reviewed by the UK team. So not only have they given the code, they're now going to take back and benefit from this again. And lastly, it's scaling into channels. And that is where we're looking to scale, not just in Ireland, into the retail, the call center, feet on the street, but the same model in other markets as well. And that's the real driver from where this project is going. And lastly, just to close off where the Ireland head is within their strategy. So we started the conversation at the start by saying that they didn't have the capability to do different changes. Well, now, hopefully, as you can see, with this transformation that's happened, not only have they got the capability to be entirely customer obsessed, They have the complete capability to be simplified, future-proof, and most importantly, grow in their future so they don't become one of those 4 out of 10 companies managing themselves to a digital extinction. So what I'll do now is hand over to Chris and Glenn, who are going to finish off about where this is going next.
Thanks, Charlie. As I'm sure you agree, the Vodafone Ireland story is a pretty incredible one. I think, for me, I love the way that intersection of business and technology and that design edge to it. It's really quite unique. And I remember Mairead, the CIO in Ireland and the main sponsor of this program, when they went in for funding for the second phase, he said, I went into the session with the CEO and I didn't have to say a word. The business did all of the pitching for me and I got the funding and we're off and running on the next phase. And I think, really summarizes how successful that's been and how much value has been driven from it. So, we want to talk a little bit about what's next, and Glenn will cover the Vodafone journey in a minute. But I just wanted to reflect. 2 years ago, we were on, I don't think this stage, but a couple of rooms down, talking about the Vodafone UK story and the digital journey there. And as I reflect on the last 5 years for Vodafone Digital, we really have built up quite an unrivaled set of end-to-end capabilities in the digital space. New products, new capabilities, and a set of services and people that's never really been brought together before. And that we think now, leveraging that new joint venture in VOIS that I talked about earlier, we're now combining VOIS and Accenture capabilities into a single end-to-end digital transformation capability that you can see behind me as VOIS Digital. And we're starting to take that externally to just the Vodafone opcos into the partner markets and beyond into the market. And that means taking things like we heard about WEF and the front-end engineering in the Ireland story, or the TAS platform and the speed of DevOps and deployment that we heard. Some opcos going from 25 deployments a year to 25,000 deployments a year. Or the CRO hub, as you can see up there, that drove 8% uplift in conversion rate in some opcos. Or even through into that experience design space that Charlie touched on, where we've built a brand new global design hub, bringing all the disparate parts of that design lifecycle under one roof, with thousands of developers in the same, of designers in that same hub, and creating that new experience. That's a big driver behind one opco going from 12% digital mix to 40% digital mix. The non-telco people in the room, that's how much are we moving sales through digital as opposed to other channels. So what's next? Well, for us, we're going beyond Vodafone and into the partner markets, but there's a lot we can still do within Vodafone. So I'll hand to Glenn to touch on that.
Thank you. Yeah. So just reflecting back on the Ireland journey, it's when we talk about the change and the self-service that we've put in place for Vodafone, and we talk a lot about TAS and the self-service capabilities for engineers, so they're not raising tickets for someone in ops to do something with the infrastructure or the observability or something else. But actually, it's also about our business colleagues as well. The CMS example in Ireland is a phenomenal example of that, where really we want to put anything that we can into the hands of our commercial teams as much as possible. Candidly, anytime we can make changes for a customer at the hands of one of our commercial teams without impacting or taking a developer away from actually creating and developing and delivering code, phenomenal. We are collectively going quicker. I can continue to work on amazing code-driven customer experiences while our commercial colleagues are updating the latest copy, the latest update, the catalogs and changes and everything else. And that's just magically appearing on our websites. That's perfect. That's self-service as far as I'm concerned. And we've only just started this journey. Ultimately, we said at the start, it's about fostering reuse and building these common platforms, and it's working. It's going great. We talked about the web platform in Ireland. We talked about things like the global rewards platform, TAS, I think I've mentioned about 15 times now. And it's at the heart of this empowered developer experience, but basically an empowered employee experience at Vodafone. We've scaled them. We've scaled them collectively, and we've rolled them out across multiple markets. And I'm not going to lie, it's been tough. There's a lot of learning that's happened in that. But the strategy where the core of that strategy is speed and efficiency. We want to make change quickly so that we can create amazing customer experiences iteratively. We can figure out where it's not quite working and iteratively improve that at speed. Chris just mentioned it. We pull all these things together, the efficiency through reuse and global scale of platforms. We have markets that aren't, bolting together the commercial off the shelf platforms and delivering 5 to 15 times per year. There are thousands of opportunities for change per year, thousands of releases, hundreds every single week. That's a massive change from where we were 4 or 5 years ago. Developer frustration. One of the key developer frustrations, waste. I'm sitting there in a wait state, waiting for something to happen. Like as a developer, I hate it. Really frustrating. Down 50% as a result of just simple, good standard approaches to development and engineering. Our delivery throughput, as a result, up 130%. We're delivering more than we ever have. As a result, our unitary cost, the amount of things that we can develop for the relative cost of our development teams, is down, meaning we've got more space and more capacity for developers to add yet more value. It's literally generating itself. There's a hugely positive impact on all of that, not just from the sentiment and engagement from our engineering and business colleagues, but our ability to deliver technical changes to improve our CX iteratively and ultimately is having a massively positive impact, on our customer experience KPIs, and importantly, our bottom line. Our strategy clearly is delivering on all fronts. Absolutely thrilled. But we're not stopping there. Now we need to turn our attention to our entire IT stack. If we're going to have true agility and reinvent core IT technology, we need to rethink catalogs, customer management, order management, logistics, and more to become the fastest telco on the planet. That's our goal. The next phase is going to build on what we've already learned over the last 5 years and drive towards a domain-driven architecture in line with our business product lines to create a highly decoupled and independent event-driven architecture so that we iteratively identify, build, and strangle our way away from these commercial, off-the-shelf IT stack products. So instead of moving from this 20 or 15 or whatever the number is, highly complex releases each year is your 20 opportunities for change and improvement for your customer experience. We're going to move towards this event-driven, cloud-native architecture so that opcos can all benefit from the 10,000 or the 25,000 opportunities for change and release that you would expect from a normal, modern engineering experience. We talked about having this modular framework approach. The world isn't standing still. I think I mentioned it at the start. Rapidly evolving technology, Gen AI, whatever the next thing is. So we've enabled this modular approach so we can enable rapid and continued advancement of our technologies that we're still yet to hear about. It's a lot. We know. We're painfully aware. There's a lot to do. But to be honest, if we look back over the last 5 years and when we now bring to life the island story, I have absolute confidence we have both the right partnership, the right experience, and the right tenacity to make this a success. So in 12 months' time, whilst Chris was 3 doors down last time, we'll be on this same stage talking about the absolute success this challenge has become. With that, I thank you. And if you have any questions, I think we still have a little bit of time remaining.